Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Melinda Corporon. I am your host, Mindy. A friend of mine told me in early 2018 that she saw a vision of me with a microphone in front of me. I laughed at the time and said, "I don't see any microphones in my future." Less than a year later, I was recording my first podcast on this show. I'm not going to say, "I hope you enjoy this podcast." My podcast is not truly meant to be enjoyed. Real grief, real healing is just that, real and raw. I provide you an opportunity to learn and share in the grief others are experiencing, and then we share how they are healing or perhaps not. Grief changes each of us in some way. Many of my guests have been encouraged to open new businesses, start foundations, and in general, work to make the world around us a better place. Grief is universal. How we decide to move onward, seeking healing, is individual. A significant part of my healing comes through the courageous kindness actions of others. As you listen to my podcasts, you will hear how you can give and receive courageous kindness too. Together, we are better.
Welcome to Real Grief, Real Healing with Melinda Corporon, taking a deep dive into the reality of the difficulty grief brings and offering insight into the healing available to each of us. Today, Episode 4, You Have the Most Important Job Today. And now your host, Melinda Corporon.
Hi friends, this is Melinda Corporon. I have a guest with me today on Real Grief, Real Healing, and I felt like it was the most appropriate thing to do at this juncture of me telling my story to have my mom on. So joining me today is Melinda Corporon, my mother. Hi, Mom.
Hi, honey.
How are you today?
Well, I'm okay. This is the first time I've done a podcast, so I'm a bit apprehensive.
But you've listened to podcasts.
Yes.
And you've got your headphones on correctly.
Yes.
And we figured out how you could hear me and I can hear you.
Yes, we are fine.
I'll just let our listeners know, or maybe remind them, that I moved to Florida about 2 years ago, and I am recording this podcast in the Orlando area, and you are in the Kansas area in Stillwell. Well, Leawood/Stillwell. So, Mom, I've told you a little bit about the podcast and the genre. The genre is about grief and healing. And what I want to do is give the listeners an opportunity to hear about our story, but from your perspective. You do have your own perspective. Everyone does. But your perspective, to me, our family, and the journey we've been on is very important. Could you give us a few details, as many as you feel are meaningful to you and important? Could you tell us about April 13th, 2014?
Okay. I haven't talked about it very much, other than just off and on to you. And talking about it again does bring back the day in court when the evil one was being sentenced and we members of the family spoke. And as I said then, it was a beautiful Sunday. It was Palm Sunday. And the day was going to be full of wonderful family activities, which is what Bill, your dad, and I liked best. It was the day before your brother Tony's birthday. So that evening we were all going out. He had selected the restaurant, which was our family tradition. Birthday person gets to pick where we all go eat. And but before that, we had a lot of activities to do. I had scheduled myself with Andrew and Katie, your niece and nephew, to go take Easter pictures. And then and Bill was going to go taking Reed to the audition for KC Superstar. That morning, he had already been to swim. He swam every day that he could. And he'd gotten home, and I fixed breakfast. And scrambled eggs with fresh crab meat, which was kind of a special breakfast. And then we chatted a little bit. He was watching TV. I was getting ready to leave. And I went over the schedule of the day one more time and, told it when we'd meet back up at the house. And the last thing I said to him after I'd listed everything, and I said to him, "And you have the most important job today." And he said, "I know it." And that's the last thing I said to him. I wish I'd ended it with, "I love you." I headed on out, picked up Dana and Andrew and Katie, my daughter-in-law and grandkids, and we headed over to Jordan Photography. And they were taking pictures with bunnies and chicks. It was a lot of fun. Pictures were great. They were happy. We were having a wonderful time. And we had finished the pictures and we were checking out. And my phone started ringing. I didn't hear it for a little while. And then I almost didn't pick it up. I thought, oh, I'll call back. But I did. Reached down and picked it up. And it was Lynn, your husband, shouting, "You have to get over to the J. You have to get over to the J. There's been a shooting. You have to get over to the J. You have to get over to the J." And I said, "What?" And he repeated it several times. I don't know how many. I said, "Okay." And I hung up. And of course, everybody was looking at me oddly. I may have shouted what, I don't know. But I looked at Dane and she looked at me funny. I said, I've got to go. I've got to go. You call Tony to come get you." Grabbed my purse and I ran out and I got in the car. And it was only where we were was a very short distance, only just a few blocks to the Jewish Community Center. And I drove like a madwoman. In fact, I was at the stoplight and in the turn lane. And when I got there, and there weren't any there were cars parked, but they weren't coming. And I swerved out around parked cars and through the intersection, totally illegally. And I rushed up and turned into the parking lot. And there was a guard who was there who wouldn't let me pass. And I said, "No, I have to pass." He said, "No." And I asked him what's going on. And he said there was a shooting and the shooter could be in the area and they weren't letting anybody go on down towards the theater area. And so I parked there and it was raining. And I kept calling Bill's phone. I kept calling it. I don't know how many times I called it, kept going to voicemail. And I hoped that they were safely in a basement somewhere. And that's why they couldn't hear the phone. And I don't know how long I did that. But then I got out of the car. I stood at the side of the car. And then I looked and the guard wasn't there anymore. So I jumped in the car and I drove down around the corner. Still in the parking lot, but toward the theater door. And as I drove up, I saw your dad's truck. The door was open. The doors, I guess both of them were open. There was an orange tarp laid out on the ground, like you see at crime scenes on television. There was yellow tape up around. I pulled up almost to the yellow tape. I turned the car off. I had my phone in my hand, I think. I think I even left the door open to the car. I got out because I could see Bill's foot was up in the car, in the truck. I knew it was his shoe and sock. I could see it. And I didn't want to do anything. All of a sudden, I just heard myself screaming. And the next thing I knew, a policewoman was grabbing hold of me, wondering who I was. I don't know what I said to her. I really cannot remember. I must have said something because she took hold of me. I wanted to go closer in, and she took hold of me and took me around and took me into the Jewish Community Center and sat me down and really started grilling me. Wanted to know who I was and how did I know, why was I there? I kept telling her who that was under the tarp. And I don't know how many times I told her. And then I kept asking her where Reed was. I said, where's Reed? And where's the boy who was with him? And she said something about the man who was in the truck with him. I said, and I screamed at her. I said, it wasn't a man, it's a boy. Where is he? And is he all right? Where is he? And she just kept asking me questions and wouldn't answer anything I said. Later, much later, thinking about that, I know why. She didn't know who I was. I, could have been part of the problem. But finally, she left. She said, I'm going to go find some answers or something like that. And I just sat there, and I don't know how long I sat there. It's funny when I try now to think back to that day, time either seems like it went forever in between one little event or the other. It was like it was just dragging on forever, and it was unreal, or it seems like it was real fast. It's kind of odd. And I know we talked about, you and I, several times, that there are still holes in our brains from things that happened that we still can't remember. And so from that day, there are things I can't remember. I don't know how long it was then before somebody, I think it was a gentleman, came up to me. I don't know whether he asked who I was or what, but I think he just simply said, your daughter's here. And I just, what? And he said, yes. And he told me where you were. And I was furious that somebody hadn't told me you were there before, because I'd been sitting there in that chair, I don't know how long, all alone, not knowing anything. And so he took me in, and then there you were, sobbing in the back of the auditorium. And you say that I asked you if that was your father. I must have, because you remember that, but I obviously knew that that's who it was. I said, where's Reed? Where's Reed? And you said, isn't he out there? And I said, no, he's not there. I don't know where he is. And you said that they were supposed to come get you. You had asked them to come get you so you could go with him in the ambulance. And I said, well, he's not there. I said, I saw an ambulance leaving. And I forget that in my story. While I was parked out in the parking lot, an ambulance drove by, but it drove very slowly. It was no sirens, no hurry. And I thought, well, it's just leaving, that, nobody was hurt. It's just leaving. That thought crossed my mind. So I told you that an ambulance had gone by. And all of a sudden, Tony came running in from the other direction, from down the hall, soaking wet, because by now it was really raining hard. I don't remember exactly at what point Lynn and Lucas got there. But I know by then you and I had talked to several police. We figured out one, he was in plain clothes, but he had a badge, was the chief of police. We kept asking where Reed was. Nobody knew. Nobody would tell us. That was so frustrating. Whether they just wouldn't tell us or whether they didn't know, they acted like they didn't know. And we wondered, how on earth can that be that they don't know where Reed is? Surely all the ambulance and the fire department, the police would have all talked to each other and would know. It seemed like it took forever before finally, I think it was the police chief who told us that he'd been taken, the hospital where he'd been taken. And the only way we had to get there, my car was still out in the parking lot. In the meantime, I had convinced the policewoman to go get my purse out of the car. I didn't have my purse. And I had to really, really badger her about that. And she finally did. She went to get my purse. But my car was part of the scene now, and we couldn't move my car. So we all went in Lynn's truck and pulled up to the emergency room, got out, and ran in. And you've told the story many times, of how we talked to the person there right in the ER at the admitting desk, asking about the boy who was brought in. And they acted at first like they didn't know what we were talking about. And then finally somebody came out and ushered us into a room that was off to the side. And I don't know whether they said the doctor will be with you, or because we kept asking, is he in surgery? Is he in surgery? Hoping, of course, that that's where he was. And the doctor came in. I remember mostly about him what you do, an older gentleman or with gray hair that was in a ponytail. I don't recall what he was wearing. I'm sure he had on a scrubs and a white coat. Told us that he hadn't made it. That was so hard to hear. I remember Lynn just screaming and yelling, and I yelled out, our last hopes were dashed. And I feel so badly now. I didn't immediately rush to Lucas or to Tony or to you. I remember just sitting there almost falling over. And I really don't remember. It's odd. I know things happened, but I can't remember the order in which any of them happened. I know at one point you asked me to call Reed's dad because you didn't have a phone. And I left a message for him. I called your brother Will. And then I called a friend. Somehow, I guess you called, or I don't know who called, but other people showed up. Other friends showed up there. By now, Dana was there with a change of clothes for Tony, and I remember a rabbi, an older rabbi from here in town,
Rabbi Rudnick.
Yes, he was there, and I don't know. He started walking with me. I think he decided I needed to walk, or maybe I decided. I don't remember. But we walked up and down the hall. We didn't talk about anything. I don't remember talking about anything with him. But it was just a comfort to have somebody walking. At some point, there was food in the next room. I don't know where that came from. From the hospital, I guess, because we had quite a crowd there in the room. I don't know how they all knew about it. I listened to a podcast that you did. You did just a few days ago, but I just listened to it today with a local radio host here, Dana Wright. And on that podcast, you talked about some of your remembrances from the day, and you mentioned that the police detective was there. Police detective was there. He was very, very nice, and trying to be very comforting. And I think he really was. He was very gentle. And I remember him asking about releasing the names, and it didn't even register, why he cared, what the deal was. I remember at some point we finally decided we needed to leave. And we got back in the truck, and because of my car sickness, motion sickness, I was in the front seat. Lynn was driving, and you and Lucas were in the back because you told Lynn, I guess you said, I can't go home. We need to go to Mom's. And I got in the car, and the car door was open. The detective knelt down outside the car and started talking to me about the fact that they would have somebody from the police department watching our home, and that they would keep the media away, and anything we needed, he, gave us his number. And I mean, he just went on and on like that. And at the time I thought it didn't register. It was, I didn't question why. I just listened to him. And
Were you
we went.
were you wondering why he was telling you that there would be protection at your house?
The only thing I think I thought of, and I think of later, I must have thought that because they were obviously, well, let me back up something I left out. One of the things way back when I was first sitting in that room with the police detective, a young woman who kept asking me questions, and I kept saying, who did this? What happened? Who did this? Who would do this? Have you caught whoever did this? I asked that question over and over and over again. I don't know why I didn't remember that earlier. But I was constantly asking, who did this? And have you got him? I never got any clear answer that I recall. But at the time when the detective was talking to me, I think what passed through my mind was whoever that was may still be after our family for some unknown reason. I think that's the only thing I could think of. I remember when Pastor Hamilton came in, and we had a prayer and talked for a little while. I remembered that we were waiting for Will to get there. And then I know I had talked to my sister earlier, your Aunt Barbie, in Dallas, and I had said, we need you up here. And I learned later that she threw stuff together and got a ticket and got to the airport and got on a plane and was up here by 9:00 that night. That was quite a rush.
I was in your living room when she walked through the door. I think I was the first person that she saw. She walked in the door, and I saw her. I was back from the vigil.
From the vigil. Yeah.
When she walked in.
I remember when you said you were going to the vigil. I remember Lynn didn't want you to go. I don't know whether I said anything to you, but I know you came over to me and you asked you needed tennis shoes because you had on sandals and it was chilly. And I sit in my closet, and I know you went to the closet and you came out wearing your dad's OU sweatshirt and my tennis shoes, and then you were gone. And of course, I know that story. You've told it many times. I Now looking back, I so wish I'd gone with you. I think I was just vacant. Is that a good word to use? My mind was vacant. And it never I wondered how everybody knew and ended up there, because I didn't think I knew I hadn't called anybody, and I knew you didn't have your phone. I didn't know whether you'd called it. Who'd called these people? Who knew? I knew how Reverend Hamilton would know, because while we were still there at the hospital, um, Steve Langhofer
Mm-hmm.
arrived at the hospital. So somebody from the hospital had called.
Yes, Pastor Steve Langhofer was there,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
Pastor Karen Lampy arrived.
Yes. So they came from the church.
Near the end of the evening, when my older brother, Will, your oldest child, walked in with his wife, Heather, and neither one of us can remember if they had their baby, Olivia, with them. I think they did, but I'm not sure. He'll have to remind us. You have a good recollection of how collected he was, and that he had a plan in place. I'd like you to tell how important it was that he started the communication process, because to me, that's part of how we started to heal.
Yes. By then, he started looking it up, I guess, because he had heard who the murderer was, and he started looking it up online, researching who he was and what was going on, what had happened. He knew innately that this was going to draw large media attention. And he can tell it well that he wanted to get our story out, our narrative, before the media got out their own narrative, their own story. He wanted it to be our story and to come from us. And he immediately started contacting people in the media that he knew. He said he had his laptop with him in the car and started writing a press release on the way up, because he lives in Bentonville. So he was driving up, and it's a 3-hour drive. And on the way up to Kansas City, he was writing what he wanted out, what he wanted the media to get, and he was already contacting people. Of course, we didn't know any of that until he got there, and until later. What is so amazing to me is that it never crossed my mind for, I'm going to say, 24 hours or more, even though I know that the next morning the three of you were on national news. How the ramifications of their murders and what it would mean for our lives, for our community, for our country. I've talked to people who were in different parts of the world who said, oh, yes, it made the international news. And for our little family in Kansas City to have been impacted this way was, at the time, I really could not comprehend all of it. I'm not sure I still do.
And so right there is a great place for me to remind our audience and you that the name of the podcast is Real Grief, Real Healing. And can you explain how you're healing?
When you asked me recently, you said the name of your podcast, and you wanted me to do it be on and tell the story as I remembered it from my perspective. and you said something about healing, and my immediate reaction to you was, I haven't healed. And I've been thinking about that, and I think it's maybe there are different definitions of the word healing. Do I manage to get through every day now mostly without tears or not being able to function? Yes, I've been able to do that for a while. I will say that the first year was disbelief. I kept waiting for them to come through the door. Every time I walked into the house, I expected Bill to be there. I expected to see Reed. The second year, reality set in. It was really difficult. And the third year was a combination of the two. So now that it's been almost 6 years, yes, I would have to say that in many ways I am healing. Does that mean that when I hear a song, something either Reed sang or something that Bill and I used to dance to, that my heart doesn't hurt so badly and tears don't come to my eyes? No, that still happens all the time. When we get messages from them, which we do all the time, I don't always recognize them until later. Sometimes I'll say something to you and you'll say, well, Mom, that was a message. And then it dawns on me, yeah, it was. So knowing they're with us, knowing they know what's going on in our lives, knowing they're sending us messages is very healing, and yet at the same time brings tears and brings, people used to say, my heart hurts. I didn't know what that meant until now. Your heart really does hurt. Your chest aches so bad sometimes that you don't think you're going to be able to catch your next breath. So that saying is certainly true. But what I do, I think, to answer your question more about healing, is I love playing bridge, which and I continue to do that. I do that as much as I can. I love being with family, with the grandkids. There are things I can do with them and for them. That's very healing for me. And also mixed with sadness, because every time I'm at an event, a ball game, a concert, anything, one of my first thoughts is Bill should be here. Reed should be here. And so, will I ever get over that? No, I know I won't. But one thing I want to say, I work hard. I work very hard when I'm around my friends and when I'm around the family to be upbeat, to not be a downer. When other people are ladies, mostly my age, some of whom are married, some of whom are divorced, some of whom are widows, and we're discussing husbands, or I bring up things about Bill and laugh, and because a lot of the ladies I played bridge with knew him, and I keep it light, and I know I'm doing that on purpose, because I don't want them to think that it's not all right to be themselves around me. And I think that's part of healing. So I just keep putting one foot in front of the other. I keep doing and going, and I guess that's my healing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for, I was going to say, agreeing to be on the podcast, but we both know you didn't have a choice.
My darling, I would do anything for you. Except anything early in the morning, I really do give you a tough time with.
That is true. You are definitely the night owl of the family. So what
Yes.
I would ask is anyone who's hearing this right now, if you could please say a prayer, not only for our family, but specifically for Melinda Corporon. If you could say a prayer for her and just lift her up in any way, in any faith, say a prayer for her because she is still walking through, as we all are, healing. And in life, we need those important people to show up even before they're invited. Thank you so much for listening to Real Grief, Real Healing, and being part of our journey. Friends, thanks so much for joining me today for this podcast of Real Grief, Real Healing with Melinda Corporon. If you want to dive deeper into how you might heal yourself or a friend, please pick up a copy of my book, Healing a Shattered Soul. Published on May 3rd, 2021, you can find my memoir anywhere books are sold. You will also find me in social media channels as Melinda Corporon. Take time to help yourself heal, accepting courageous kindness. Take time to heal another by giving courageous kindness. Together, we are better.
Real Grief, Real Healing is copyright 2021 to 2022, Melinda Corporon, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. This podcast is a production of 818 Studios.